Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the Safavid and Mughal empires, which are other two gunpowder empires. So we're thinking about the gunpowder empires. We've already talked about the Ottomans. Remember that one of the things that all three of these empires had in common is they all used military conquest, hence the name Gunpowder Empires. They're all also Turkic people, and they all also were ruled by absolute rulers. So we're going to talk about some cool absolute rulers today. And additionally, they were all Muslim. And so we'll be seeing how Islam plays a role in their ruling. So we're going to start with the Safavids. And the Safavids are basically the Persian Empire. So if you remember what present-day country that is, that's located in Iran. So they were bordered on one side by the Ottoman Empire, which remember started in Turkey and then spreads into the Middle East and North Africa and Europe. So they're in 3 continents. And then the Mughal Empire, who were descendants of the Mongols, which we've already talked about, Kublai Khan in China. So this is another relative. So they're in India. And right in the middle would be present-day Iran, which is the Persian Empire, and that's the Safavids. Now, they practice, remember there's 2 types of Islam. There are the Sunni and the Shiite, and they actually practice what is today the minority, which is Shiite, which means that they follow the descendants of Ali, which was Muhammad's son-in-law, and they believe that the Caliph must be directly related to the Prophet. And the Ottomans, remember, are Sunni. The Safavids, for the most part, are also not going to be as religiously tolerant as the Ottomans are. They want you to be Shiite, or they don't want you to live there. She has a more stricter view of Islam, and that is one of the reasons that they want people who follow that. So you could see here present-day Iran. So the Safavid Empire is this yellow here. So keep in mind this is the Mughals, and then over here, of course, would be the Ottoman Empire. So they're going to have to deal with folks on both sides kind of competing with them. The origins of the Safavids, they started as a military group that kind of rise up. And so we talked about the soldiers of the Ottomans. They had the Janissaries, and those were kind of the most elite soldiers. And they also had the Ghazis, which are your typical soldiers. So the Safavid version of that's one of my favorite words to say, the Kizilbash. And that means redheads. And so they get the name because they wore red hats, obviously. So Ismail was the head of the Kizilbash, and he, kind of brings them into Iran. So just like Osman was the founder of the Ottomans, Ismail is going to be the founder of the Safavids. So he takes this title Shah. So remember in the Ottoman Empire, what do we call the leader? He was the Sultan. So now he's taking this title and is called Shah. And Shah literally means king. And so he called himself King of Kings. And there is constant fighting between the Safavids and the Ottomans. They're struggling to have this kind of shared territory. So that little box that's a little hard to see, it's constant warfare between the Safavids and Ottomans. So the Safavids did make treaties with the Europeans. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so they made treaties with the Europeans that helped them to fight with the Ottomans. And so the Ottomans are never successful in conquering Safavid land. The Europeans benefit from this trade with the Safavids. And you can see here in this work of art that is Safavid, the similar look of the Turkic people, the Mongolic kind of influence. This, if I was looking at this just offhand, it could look something Ottoman to me. And so there is a very similar style that these gunpowder empires are all using. The greatest ruler, so just like Suleiman is the greatest ruler of the Ottomans, the greatest ruler of the Safavids is Shah Abbas. And so Shah King, so it's Abbas the Great. And he gets kind of expands a little bit of the northern, so the empire at its height is under him. He moves the capital to Isfahan, and it became one of the most beautiful cities in the world. He also, is the most tolerant of the leaders, but remember that the Safavids in general are not tolerant of other religions. So once he dies, as often happens with really great leaders, as happened with Suleiman, the empire begins to decline. And that's your blank there. The empire began to decline. And in 1736, it actually ended, and Iran, present-day Iran, which at that time was still called Persia, was broken into several smaller states. So this is not a long-lasting empire, so they don't start till the 1400s. They end, 300 years. But they are big competition between the Mughals and the Ottomans. The Ottomans, as we know, are going to last for a long time. They're going to last over 500 years. So, Shah Abbas, that's a picture of him, kind of very much this similar sultan hat that we saw with the Ottomans. And they do copy the Ottomans, to be a better military and encourage trade, all of these things. So if we're looking at what they're trading, so for each of these empires, we need to know their goods. So the Ottomans, remember, were trading coffee and ceramics. We talk about China, tea, porcelain, gunpowder, paper, silk. And so the Safavids, they're famous for their rugs. And so you can see here, this is a Persian rug. So when I lived in Turkey, I learned a lot about Turkish rugs. And one of the things that I learned is that Persian rugs are more expensive. And that's because they use a different knotting style when they tie and make their rugs. And it's actually, their style is more complicated than what the Turks use. So that's why theirs is more expensive. So they also do some tile work as well. But their porcelain and kind of things like this are not going to be, and their ceramics are not going to be as desired as that of the Chinese or the Ottomans. So it's their rugs that we're really going to kind of remember them for. So let's move on to the Mughal Empire. So we're continuing east. We had started with the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, then we moved to Iran, and now we're moving over to India, which would also include present-day India and present-day Pakistan, and a little bit even of Afghanistan. So the Safavids are the shortest time period, and then the Mughals, the Mughals are the shortest time period, and the Safavids are the second, and then the Ottomans last the longest. So the Mughals are coming after, if you remember ancient Indian empires, we're talking about the Mauryans and the Guptas who had ruled for a long time, and the Mughals are going to really unite the different groups. So the Mughals are going to be successful in uniting all the different group people, and they're going to unite northern and southern India. They're going to get all but the bottom little tip. So the Mughals are Turkish Muslims too. So remember, all of our gunpowder empires are Turkic people, and their type of warriors were called Rajputs. So we have the Ghazis and the Janissaries, and then we have the Qizilbash, and now we have the Rajputs. They're actually descendants of the Mongol leader Babur, who was related to Timur and all of these other different Mongols. They're all distantly related cousins and such. And they form the Mughal Empire. And so they are Mongols, but they're living in India, and that's why we call them the Mughals. It's actually, we get the word Mughal from like Donald Trump. Before he was president, he was always considered to be this great business mogul, which means you're somebody who's really successful in business, and that's actually where the word came from. Now, one of the things that's going to set the Mughal Empire apart is that they are living in India, and while the Mughals are Muslims, the people living in India are Hindu. And so the Mughals are going to be ruling an empire that is predominantly full of people who are not the same religion. So they actually had to be rather strict to stay in control. So it's kind of like the Safavids in the fact that religious tolerance isn't always as high. But there are some good leaders in the Mughal Empire who are religiously tolerant, because they do have a vast Hindu group of people living in their empire, so they've got to figure out what to do with them. So here we can see, so Akbar the Great, you can see his empire, and then it expanded under Shah Jahan, and then his descendants. So Akbar the Great, he's actually one of my favorite kind of historical rulers, and he unified the empire. And one of the reasons he's one of my favorites is because I love religiously tolerant leaders who do, beautiful expansion and works of art and stuff. Suleiman, I like a lot for the same reasons. And Akbar and Suleiman have a lot in common. So Akbar unifies the empire, expands into northern India. And just like Suleiman, he's kind of this brilliant organizer. and he practices religious toleration. And one of the things that he does, he sets up a system that's kind of similar to the Millet system of the Ottomans. He also marries a Hindu princess, and he is Muslim himself, but marries a Hindu princess to kind of promote this religious toleration. His religious views are going to change, though, because he becomes so tolerant that he actually kind of develops this new religion that's supposed to be accepting of everybody, which really doesn't please everybody in the kingdom. He does improve the tax system and would sit as the judge, and people would come to him and tell their complaints, and he would make, kind of legal decisions and stuff. So he's a really effective leader. The greatest success that the Mughals have is in strengthening the Indian economy. So they're very prosperous financially. And the Indians were farmers, so we got lots of great crops. But what we really know them for is their textiles, so cloth, and also spices. They also are going to produce iron, which is going to help these gunpowder empires with their cannons. And they're going to have, if you think about India as a peninsula, so it has a lot of trade ports, and they're going to really flourish with trade. Unlike, remember, we talked about China and Japan of closing themselves off to trade. So because of this, business talent, like I was mentioning before, this is where we get the word that a business person is called a successful business person is called a Mughal. So after Akbar dies, like we see this continual cycle, we'll have this great ruler, and then the one who rules after them is just not nearly as effective. One of the things that Akbar does is he starts this, as I mentioned, this divine faith religion, which he tries to combine Islam and Hinduism, and that does not go over well, especially with the Muslims. He also, he was a big, a lot of the untouchables, like the bottom of the caste system, they're going to convert to Islam because they like this idea of equality that they have. And Hindu women were forced to start doing the veiling. And so there are practices that typically Islam would come in and help a lot of women, but particularly what the Mughals were doing was not very helpful for women in India. So Shah Jahan is probably our most famous ruler. While I like Akbar, Shah Jahan is the one most people remember and the one that you really need to remember, and that's because he built the Taj Mahal. So Shah Jahan rules at the height of the Mughal Empire, like at its biggest time. He does all this military conquest, but because of the military conquest, he had to tax the people a lot so that he could pay for all this military conquest. Remember that the government, how do they run and do things, is because they get money from us from taxing us. And so the taxes, people get really frustrated with him. He runs out of money, basically what happens. So he's greatly in love with his wife. They have several children. And when she dies, he comes up with this idea of this beautiful tomb. And so he builds the Taj Mahal for her. His original design also included, hers is white, a black marble tomb that would face hers. And it takes a long time to get this built. So the Taj Mahal, maybe you have seen a picture of it before, but that is what it is. It looks, of course, like a mosque. And the Taj Mahal is a wonderful example of Islamic architecture, of Mughal architecture, because we see, the minarets here. We see the domes, the arches, and it is beautiful, beautiful white marble. Now, their video link is in Google Sites page, and I encourage you to follow it. It's a short 2.5-minute video, and you can just see the beauty of the Taj Mahal. And there's a couple more pictures of Taj Mahal. So Shah Jahan, just like Abbas had moved the capital to Isfahan and makes it this great city, Shah Jahan is going to do that with Delhi. So we're going to need to know the capitals for all our cities. If you choose to do the Gunpowder Empires map, you would do the capitals. So what's the capital of the Ottoman Empire? Istanbul. The capital of the Safavid Empire is Isfahan. And the capital of the Mughal Empire is Delhi. And so he makes Delhi the most beautiful capital city, just like Shah Abbas had tried to do to Isfahan. So after he dies, the Mughals have a lot of revolts, and they really just have a hard time kind of dealing with this. They get rid of all the religious tolerance. They actually burn and destroy Hindu temples, which makes the Hindus really mad. And the government just really kind of falls to pieces. By 1858, the Mughal Empire is nothing more, and the British are going to come in and take advantage of that. So that is the end of the Safavids and Mughals. And really, with the Mughals, remember the Taj Mahal, remember Shah Jahan, and the Mughals, like India, remember they're trading textiles and spices, and the Safavids are trading rugs, carpets, if you will, and they are, located in modern day Iran, and the Mughals are located in India.